As a little boy, I always dreamed that one day I'm going to have a business doing something. I always had a hustler's mentality in a good way. So Coke bottles, sold newspapers, wash cars, shine shoes, cut grass, clean office buildings, whatever I could do to make a couple of extra dollars. And that's where it started. So the way the payroll business worked, you would turn your timesheets in on a Wednesday. The payroll company would process on a Thursday and deliver the checks on a Friday. But somebody to pick up the timesheets, take them back to the office, we do the payroll, and Friday deliver them. So I had a courier service, didn't know I had a courier service basically. He said, I'm quoting him, I thought about this last night and I don't think you can do this. I'm waiting for the punchline. I'm waiting for him to start smiling. So he said, stone faced. He said, so you might as well leave. Just cold. I said, that's unacceptable, sir. We struggled for a long time. I didn't get paid for years. And always put the best face on. Make sure the employees got paid. It gives you a mentality of, this is a survival mentality. So you have to do what you need to survive.
What was the early kind of your recollection of having me, your son, back in the business full time?
I will say that, I can say this now because it's history. I think I was constantly trying to test you to see whether you were going to do everything you say you were going to do. And you certainly passed that test.
What was that experience like, and also having to let go of your baby and exit?
That's my baby. That's what it's like giving your child away or something. She was the brains behind our operation. She's one of the smartest people in the world.
Yes, yes.
And she kept me grounded in all my crazy ideas. My favorite term is follow up.
Borderline aggravation, I think is part of it.
You call it what you want, but it's follow up. It gets the job done.
I'm your host, Jason Burns, and we'll be bringing you the stories from the front lines. Everything from last mile to the first mile in the most dynamic industry in today's supply chain. If you like the content we're producing, the videos we're releasing, the stories we're telling you, give us a like, subscribe to our channels, give us some feedback on how we can improve your last to first journey.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Burns, founder of QCS Logistics, and you are watching the Last to First podcast.
If there's one thing we know about last mile logistics, it can be the most challenging but critical component of any supply chain. But drop-off, they make it easy. I sold my business to drop-off a few years ago and had a first-hand experience to see why they're the leading provider of same-day delivery solutions in the healthcare, retail, and industrial sectors. National brands trust drop-off to deliver same-day solutions with transparency and timely deliveries to satisfy their needs. Rated as one of the best places to work by the Austin Statesman and a proud recipient of the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in America. Drop-off is transforming the $30 billion same-day delivery industry. Call 888-DROP-OFF or go to dropoff.com and let them serve your needs. Now back to Last to First.
Welcome back to our next and final episode of Season 1 on the Last to First podcast. I'm your host, Jason Burns. And today is it's a special moment for me. We've been having very engaging interviews with a lot of guests, but this person is not a guest. This is someone that is truly my hero. He is the person that has taught me everything I probably know about business, about life, and still have many lessons to learn. But I am honored and privileged to be here with none other than Ronnie Burns, who is my father. He's the former founder and CEO of QCS Logistics and a CLDA Hall of Famer. Dad, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here. Special moment for me as well.
Yeah, this is really special. But talking about the special moment, like the first thing is the building that we're in. So I want to start this conversation off with your origin story and your early childhood. But as we walked into this building, you said, I know this building. I used to actually work in this building. Tell us about what this building means for you.
As a young boy in probably elementary school, this building was owned by Justice Reeves O. Artigue Jr., who was the first African-American state Supreme Court justice. When he practiced law, this was his building. And my mother, your grandmother, worked for him for 30 years as his legal secretary. I used to come over on Saturdays to clean his floors. I had multiple jobs as a kid. One was cleaning offices. And the thing I remember about the justice, and he was very particular. So he had floors, the floor with the little crevices in it. I used to clean those floors with a toothbrush. I'd get on my knees to clean between the crevices with a toothbrush. Very particular, very detail-oriented, but it taught me many lessons. So when we pulled up this morning, I have fond memories about this building. One of the places where I can honestly say that this probably started my entrepreneurial career.
Yeah, for a full circle moment. I've heard that story about you using a toothbrush to clean floors. I thought you were, I thought you were lying about that.
No.
But I think just the fact that we're here and obviously it was unplanned that this happened that way, but it's a true full circle moment. And it's a good segue into the first part of the conversation, which is what were your early memories in childhood, or what motivated you to get on this entrepreneurial journey that you've been on for so many years? And I know I've heard a lot of these stories, but I think it's really cool to understand like those early days and where you were at and what drove you to ultimately embark on this career.
I think as a young boy, I always had a hustler's mentality in a good way. So Coke bottles, so newspapers, wash cars, shine shoes, cut grass, clean office buildings. And my best friend is a guy by the name of Eric Wright. He and I had a little lawn care business, we called it back then. Mm-hmm. And we would cut yards in the neighborhood. And so we just did multiple things, shine shoes, whatever I could do to make a couple of extra dollars. Now, the interesting thing about that, I grew up in a household where there were 5 of us. I was the oldest of 5. And my dad was a teacher and a football coach. My mother was the secretary, as I mentioned earlier. But raising a family of 5, they didn't have all the money in the world, so you had to stretch a little bit. Yeah. So I always wanted nice clothes. I always wanted to fancy this and fancy that. If you wanted to fancy this and fancy that, go out and make some money so you could buy the fancy this and fancy that. Yeah. And I did. And I just enjoyed hustling. That's just been a passion of mine. And as a little boy, I always dreamed that one day I'm going to have a business doing something. And that's where it started.
Yeah. And I know, obviously, growing up in a household, Pa, my grandfather, your dad, was a disciplinarian. Grammy was one that held the house down. And you had 4 siblings that you were the big brother to, and still to this day, now looked at as the patriarch. When you were thinking about one day you want to be entrepreneurial, one day you wanted to own your own business, did you ever dream that you would become as successful as you have?
This was my dream. And I need to tell my story about Liberty Bank. I went to work for Liberty Bank back in 1974. Liberty Bank had just opened in 72. And Liberty was a small African-American owned bank, okay? So I went to work as an accountant. The bank was small. And one thing about a small business, you have one title, but you do everything. Yeah. And I met a lot of entrepreneurs coming to the bank and talked to a lot of people. And you get that, I can do that. I always had that dream. And then when I worked at Liberty, because Liberty was an institution where the bank was growing and trying to make its mark, and first African-American-owned bank in the city of New Orleans. He had a lot of challenges and struggles, but just worked real hard to grow. I worked directly with the president, and we would work 24 hours sometime, all night. I still today reconcile my checking account to the penny.
Every morning.
Every morning. So anyway, I just learned so many valuable lessons at Liberty. And one of the things that helped me was that nothing was impossible. Everything was possible, okay? I had a very good work ethic working at the bank. And as I saw different business people coming through the bank, I always thought about what business can I get into? And the real story is that I had a friend of mine, a guy I went to grammar school, high school, and college. And this guy went to work for a big company in California, a hospital. And while he's at the hospital, he decided to go to graduate school at Pepperdine. And the guy who owned the hospital came to him one day and said, look, I'm thinking about selling the hospital. So just like when I bought the hospital, I brought my people in, the new owner could bring his people in. So my friend had to make a decision what he wanted to do. But also he had to do a research paper. So he did a research paper called The First Step, From Employee to Entrepreneur. And he covered all the different steps of what one goes through when trying to make that decision, from leaving the safety and calm waters of a job. But back in those days, your company paid for your insurance, and you might have had a company car you were driving. A lot of safety nets. He sent me that to review before he turned it in. And that really just something that I gravitated to, okay? And I think after reading that paper, I just knew I had to make my move from the bank. Yeah. And my first business was a payroll processing business. And we did payroll for a lot of the small business customers at the bank. And that was a tough business.
About 10 years ago, I was sitting at an industry conference and I heard a speaker say, the data will be just as important as the delivery. In today's fast-paced environment where the last mile has become the most critical component of today's supply chain, customers and shippers now expect carriers to do way more than just make a successful delivery. The game has changed, and having actionable data is the key to winning business in today's fast-paced environment. That's why the team at Dispatch Science has been setting the pace on last mile technology and dispatch software. Since 2018, Dispatch Science has reimagined traditional dispatching to solve the problems that stifle operations and reduce productivity. Need custom dispatch boards and multi-map views for your team by customer or by region? Challenged with turning a spreadsheet of stops into efficient and optimized routes? Or maybe you're looking to leverage API and EDI integrations to seamlessly integrate your customers across multiple platforms. Transform your operations using the integrated dispatch science platform. Reduce manual errors, streamline efficiency, and create smoother workflows and faster response times for your staff and your clients. It's a game changer, and their 3 pricing plans are listed right on their website. So if you're serious about taking your journey from last to first, visit www.dispatchscience.com or call 844-558-2011 and give them the discount code of L2F. That's right, L2F, and get 10% off your first month's invoice. Now back to last to first.
Yeah.
Let me pause you for a second. I want to get into that, but I want to go back to something that made me think about, you talked about the things you learned as a young man working at Liberty Bank from Mr. McDonald, who's the former president, the chairman of Liberty Bank. But were you always that disciplined? Like earlier, who were you at that moment in time? Were you always the Ronnie Burns that people know today and see that's very disciplined and follow up and focus, or did you have a little bit of play in you?
Ronnie Burns was very undisciplined, put it that way. But I was young and I wanted to have fun. I was free, single, and disengaged, they would say. Mm-hmm. And like any young person, I loved to party. But when I went to work for Liberty, and Alden McDonald is the CEO of the bank now, and he was my boss back then. He's a cherished friend today. I sit on the board of the bank today, so we could be co-workers, colleagues. We've done some business stuff together. So we've grown tremendously over the years. But I just noticed the discipline he had and the focusedness he had and the sternness that he had, okay, which was probably something I needed. And this is interesting. When I went to work for the bank as a part-timer when I initially went to the bank. I worked for Exxon for a year and moved back to New Orleans, and I went to work part-time. So when I asked the question, do you have a permanent job? And he said, I do. He said, but I want to make it perfectly clear to you. If I sense you came in straight from the street to the office, you're gone. I'm going to fire you. So just direct toughness, but I always learned something. Okay? I would go to meetings with Alden at night, meet different people, and I really learned how to network at Liberty Bank. Yeah. I mean, look, network, engagement, joining boards, committees, meeting the right people, selling yourself. And that really was, I think, which was excellent training ground for me for what I ultimately wanted to do.
Yeah. Going back to where you left off at, I've had the opportunity to read that manuscript from Employed to Entrepreneur.
Right.
And it's truly a really insightful piece. What about that made you feel like you were ready? You talked about your first venture was Payroll Plus, which I want to get into the story there, but what made you feel ready to take that leap? Because at the time you were married. I believe Vinny, my older brother, was born. I don't know if I was born at that point.
You were on the way?
I was on the way. So you're leaving a job with the wife, one kid, one on the way. It's a very risky proposition.
The reason I thought I was ready, because as I said, I always did something. So even when I worked for the bank, I had little bookkeeping jobs. I did that. And I did the books for a group of doctors who owned the building, okay? I managed the building for them. 2 guys had the contract at the Pontchartrain Park golf course. I managed their books. And so I had a lot of little entrepreneurial things I was doing. And when I first got into the payroll processing business, the way I got into that business was that Liberty Bank, again, was a small bank, and the bank was trying to grow, and the bank was trying to offer services to its customers, where it'd be a one-stop. If you were a customer, the bank wanted your checking account, they wanted you to borrow money from the bank, but if you had a business, wanted to process your payroll. Right. So we had a contract with a company out of Houston, Texas called Control Data. And Control Data would do payrolls for the small business customers of the bank. And I was the liaison between the bank and Control Data. And one day they had a bad storm, hurricane or something. The plane couldn't land there. So these employees couldn't get their checks. And these were people who got paid every Friday. Yeah. Construction workers and folk who live from week to week. Control Data's ownership made a decision like this. We don't have that much volume, as what's the problem. They got out of the business. A light bulb goes off in my head. Maybe I can get into the payroll business. I got into the payroll business. I had relationships with all these customers because remember, I was the contact. And I just had a feeling I could do this. I just had a confidence that look, I think I'm prepared. I had gotten some of that play out of my system. I think I knew how to focus, and I knew what it meant to put the time in.
Yeah.
So I started the payroll business, and we grew that business to probably 100 accounts before I left Liberty.
So before you left Liberty, you were moonlighting on the side with the payroll business. You got to 100 accounts, and you officially left the bank. But I believe you kept some relationship with the bank at that time.
Always. So when I left Liberty Bank, one of my areas was I was an accountant over the counter department, auditing department, over the building. The bank had couriers. And we had 3 elderly guys who were retired guys who were the couriers, and they reported to me. 2 of the guys got sick, and the 3rd guy died. Alden, the president, came to me and said, look, I need you to handle my courier stuff till I can replace these guys. I said, why don't you just give me a contract? Let me just handle it, period. We did that. I was able to talk the guy who retired out of retirement, so he came back to work for me.
And this is why the payroll business is operating, and this is, comes on
So
ancillary.
we were doing Liberty Bank's courier stuff.
Okay.
And I had my little payroll company, and I had, back in those days, you know all the technology you have today. So the way the payroll business worked back in those days, you would turn your timesheets in on a Wednesday. The payroll company would process on a Thursday and deliver the checks on a Friday. But somebody to pick up the timesheets, take them back to the office, we do the payroll, and Friday you deliver them. So I had a courier service, didn't know I had a courier service, basically. The payroll business, as I said, was a very tough business, but the courier business was exciting. So we had Liberty Bank's work, and then there were a couple of other savings and loans that picked up their work. And again, I made a number of contacts by working at the bank. So I felt very comfortable calling on people. And the bank actually helped a lot to open the door for me to get to other folk. And the courier business really started growing. And a key story about that was that we're still running the payroll business and the courier business. And I get a guy we're doing courier work for. He approached me about buying the payroll business. And I was happy to sell a payroll business, quite honestly. And we started the courier business. We going, okay. Our big break came, though. A friend of mine that I went to grammar school with, I'm in a grocery store one night getting milk and bread for you and Vinny, and I'm in line behind this guy. In one of those conversations of, I hadn't seen this guy in years. What are you doing now? He worked for Radio Shack. I said, what are you doing? I got a courier company. He said, man, we use couriers at Radio Shack. He said, and I'm over that area. So he said, call me tomorrow. I'm going to help you get registered with Radio Shack. Because the company we use, we're not satisfied with.
Okay.
So the way fate would be, Radio Shack back in those days, you had to register with them, but you got paid through the Bank of Boston. So you sent your invoice to the Bank of Boston. Long process. So the first month, we did $50. I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, all this work for $50. But we kept growing. We got all the Radio Shacks in. We started averaging like $50,000 a month, which was really worth it. So we were on our way with Radio Shack, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, whatever it took. We had people doing Christmas, with holidays when they were selling all this stuff. Yeah. So that was a big break. Now, we really got our footing. But one thing that's critical I didn't mention is when I was in the payroll business, I had an uncle who had a travel agency, and I did his payroll for him. So he had a second floor in his building, so I rented space in his building. So one day I get a call from a group saying we have a convention, a courier convention in Louisville, Kentucky. And the way it works is that they went to the local chamber or something, they got the name of companies, but they sent notice out to 3 companies, but the first company that responded was the company that was invited because they didn't want to have a competitive environment there. The only way the second company couldn't go if the first company said, fine, they can go. So my uncle, because I was doing his payroll and wasn't charging him for it, he said, look, he had a travel. He said, look, I'll get the tickets for you to go to the convention. I went to that convention, and my world just opened up then.
And that was the MCAA.
MCAA. Well, it didn't have the name back then. It was just a group of guys company. It was Zip Express, Brad Baumett. That was the guy's name who owned the company. And they invited a number of different companies. And I just met just a lot of people, the guys from the East Coast, New York, where they were doing gigantic business. And that just really kind of opened my eyes up. It just gave me additional motivation.
So let's dig into that, because I think I want to give the context of what time frame this was. And part of Last of First is to tell the evolution of this industry, how it's going from the days of Stagecoach with Wells Fargo back in 1800s to drones and autonomous vehicles now. But what year was this? This is roughly what year?
Probably
So QCS was founded in 84.
84. Probably late 80s.
Late 80s, okay. And then describe, so what I want to ask you was to paint the picture of what did the industry look like at that time? What were the types of customers? You mentioned Radio Shack. What was the technology or lack thereof? How did you communicate? And then when you went to this conference or maybe this meetup, it sounded like what it was, of a bunch of guys doing different types of things around the country. What opened your eyes and what did you see on the horizon coming up for this?
We communicated with two-way radios. That was the form of communication we used. What opened up my eyes is that this guy, Brad Baumert with Zip Express, they were already into technology. They had created their own technology to dispatch runs, okay? Mm-hmm. The way we dispatch runs, we would just, somebody would call the office and we'd have two-way radios. So the dispatch would dispatch a run to me. We had a big board, we wrote everything on.
There's a board, I have a picture as my desktop screen,
right,
where I'm gonna put it up on this video so people see it. But me and Vinny are in the dispatch room.
Right.
There's a wall, carpeted
right,
wall, and it's like an index card. So order comes in, and I guess somebody writes the ticket on it,
right,
and you slide the card across, and they had the big map and the two-way radios. I think Mr. Kern was in that picture.
Yeah, it was. When I went to that conference, though, you started talking. The biggest thing was networking, talking to people, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and so forth. So I realized that at that conference that there were so many industries that use the courier service. There were computer companies just coming online, so we do work for them. You started learning about uniforms. Some companies had uniforms for drivers, okay, mm-hmm, ID badges. You started learning about insurance. There were some insurance providers. As it started to grow, mm-hmm, insurance providers. And then the networking was good. I spent a lot of time in the early years just visiting our other courier companies, learning from these bigger companies. Yeah. And that really just opened my, I just thought it was nothing that we couldn't do. Mm-hmm. But then you learn the industries people were in, okay? And you feel I could contact the industry in my hometown. The other thing is that you started learning things like, I remember one guy, and I forgot what city it was in, but he said, look, most of the companies in my town closes at 5. I stay open 24/7. So that concept resonated with me, okay? Mm-hmm. A lot of companies didn't work on weekends. So you start looking for the things that you can implement in your particular area that nobody else was doing. And that really helped us.
When you first start a business, and it's like a better term, it's guts and nuts. Like you're just trying to figure it out. There's no blueprint. There's no one really giving you a template. You're picking up things as you go along, but a lot of it's on you, right? A lot, you're the founder, you're the visionary. What would you say were kind of key things that you did to help grow the business in those early days? Like what were some of the strategies, techniques that you used to get from a payroll company that transitioned to a courier company, and you got a big break with Radio Shack, but you still had to continue to grow the business? What were those things that you implemented?
You learned that you had to have salespeople out there, okay? And one of the things I learned, my background is I finished school in accounting, in business administration. So initially, I thought I could sit behind the desk and run my business that way. But you quickly learn that you're the face of the business, so you got to get out there and face your customers. You got to get out there and let them know who you are. You got to sell yourself. Yeah. How we grew the business was that I pride myself on networking, connectability, and my favorite term is follow up. And yes, I believe in just following up on everything, okay? We had things like
borderline aggravation, I think is
well, you call it what you want it, but it's follow up. It gets the job done. We used to do a thing in the office that if wherever we went to, whether it was a reception or whatever, you get by the person's business cards. So I required, me included, and I had 2 salespeople as we started growing. We had to write a letter that night or the next morning if it was a night event to that customer. Dear Mr. Burns, nice meeting you, such and such and such. I'd like to call on you at such and such a time. So we write a letter. A week later, we had to call on them, okay? Just constant follow-up, okay? And then we tried to learn what the competition was doing or not doing, and we can do.
How'd you do that?
How you did that? I did some things that might have not been clearly above board, but I would get people to call a competitor. secret shopper and find out what's their prices for this, what's their price for that. Even have them, I had friends and associates all over, so somebody who might have been a secretary in the law office, let's say she called a competitive company, and they come in and give their price and so forth, and I would get their proposal and see how we could tweak it, okay?
Yeah. What, was there a lot of competition back in those days that you recall being very competitive space?
Yeah, I think of a lot of competition, and it's kind of survival of the fittest, you know. The big boys didn't want the little boys to get in, and we were a small fish in a big pond, so we had to swim faster and quicker and outwork our competitors. And also what helped us out a lot, we made some good contacts in the business community. So we got doors open by company CEOs, people of politicians. I got on a lot of boards and committees and made myself very visible. And everywhere I went, I was talking about quick courier service. And that was my tagline.
Who were some of those early customers? You mentioned Freeport. What were some of the significant clients early on that you felt were catalyst accounts to help give you that break you need to keep pushing forward?
The Xerox Corporation, Freeport McMoran, which is a huge corporation in New Orleans, Entergy Corporation. A big one for us was the Louisiana Lottery. And the reason why that was a big one for us is because the Louisiana Lottery is back in the days of Pony Express. The lottery put a bid out, and it was for the entire state. Pony Express won a bid, and they had the whole state. But Pony Express, they couldn't keep up with the lottery. There was no casino game in there, so the lottery was the big thing.
These are bringing lottery tickets from a distribution center to the retailers where people can purchase.
Retailers all over the state. So the lottery made a decision that they were going to break up the regions, okay? There were 6 different regions. So they bidded the regions out separately. We bid it, a long shot bidder, but we won 2. The biggest region was the New Orleans area, and I think Baton Rouge might have been the second. So we won both of those, which was 2 big ones. And it was heavy volume, okay? It wasn't an easy bid. We bid it to work, and we had attorneys that negotiated the contract, and the day I went to sign the contract, the guy tells me with the lottery, he didn't think we could do the work. He didn't want to sign the contract. So again, I had little political relationships that kind of helped us to
tell a story. I think it's important to tell a story in detail. I've heard the story several times, and I want the audience to hear it. You are literally in Baton Rouge at the state capitol building, there to sign probably the largest contract you had maybe in the history of the company.
Well, the largest contract we have the company. And what happened, I remember that morning, if you want me to tell the whole story.
I've told him to be concise because we can go on, but this is an important story. So yeah, tell the story.
So we bid it like everybody else did, and we were fortunate enough to win these 2 areas, okay? My attorney was on vacation something. I had to get another attorney to represent me who happens to be your mother's cousin, who was an attorney in Baton Rouge. We negotiated the contract, that everything was good. So the day I'm going up to sign it, I must have left home at 5 o'clock in the morning for 8 o'clock meeting. I'm just as happy as I could be singing on my way from New Orleans to Baton Rouge. So I get to the office, the lottery office, and there was a guy who was the distribution manager. So he was coming to the meeting with me. As we walk in through the hallway, there's a guy standing in the hallway, and just standing, twiddling his thumbs, and he says, "Hey, man, what's going on?" Just real upbeat guy. I said, "Doing good." I said, He said, "Who are you?" So I said, I'm told him my name, and we had gone to sign my lottery contract. He said, "Oh, good luck, courier contract for life." He said, "Good luck to you." He said, "If you ever need me, just stop by. I'm the new vice president." So when I go to the office to sign the contract, the guy had to see. So he said, I'm quoting him, "I thought about this last night, and I don't think you can do this." I'm waiting for the punchline. I'm waiting for him to start smiling or something.
Yeah.
So he said, stone face, "I don't think you can do this." He said, "So you might as well leave." Just cold. I said, "That's unacceptable, sir." He said, "Goodbye." So I got up, walking back down the hall. The same guy I saw going in. And I had a whole different disposition. He said, "What's wrong, man?" So I said, "I just got," and I used the word.
You can curse on this.
I curse on this? I just got fucked. We said, "Come on in my office." He said, his guy's name was Bonnie Fusel. He said, "Look, man," he said, "I'm going to be the new president of the lottery. And there's a new administration coming in." And he said, and the lottery was regulated by the governor. He said, the governor wanted to make sure local companies get their fair share, especially minority companies. Anyway, so he said, I'll correct this. So just he said, we correct it, got it corrected. I got a call, and we got to work. But he also called me when we went back to actually sign the contract. He said, look, man, I had to stretch out for you. He was just one of these down-earth guys.
Yeah.
He said, don't mess me around. So we had to, every month, we had to go to Baton Rouge we had to give a report every month on the number of deliveries, how many we missed, what was late, blah, blah, blah. We were ranked against UPS. Pony Express did a little bit of the work, and we rated number one every time. I took great pride in making sure I was number one. And the reason why we were number one, remember I talked about networking.
Yeah.
There's a man who worked for Liberty Bank named Melvin Jones. And Melvin Jones was a former postal inspector, retired guy working for the bank. And I used to talk to him all the time. And he said, I'm going to help you find some drivers. He got all these retired postal guys, probably about 15 of them.
Wow.
And that was my delivery force. And you tell these older guys, be to work for 6 to there for 5:30. And that contract just worked beautiful for us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that what touches me about that story is a few things. One, fortunately, you weren't afforded the opportunity initially based off of your credentials and experience and the bid that you were judged by I'm assuming it has something to do with the color of your skin. And
I was young.
And maybe
Right,
being young.
right.
But it's always something to say when you are living right and you're doing right by people. The universe has a way of taking care of these things. And obviously, I think that was not just a moment where you were able to get the contract, but then, as you said, you really start to elevate your game and your ranking above UPS
Right.
on a monthly basis. So that must have taken you to another level, another confidence to continue to grow. And you had to have felt some sense of, if we can do this, there's nothing else we can't. You've said the saying to me many times, to whom much is, well, no, that's what's the saying. I'm qualified to do something with nothing.
We have done so much with so little, we qualified to do anything with nothing.
Say it one more time.
We have done so much with so little, we qualified to do anything with nothing.
Beautiful.
And the thing that Jay, I think that helped me was that we just weren't going to roll over. We wasn't going to just accept that no and just keep marching, okay? In business, I've had so many mentors, okay? And one message, they all say it in some form or fashion, you got to turn no's into yes. And the way you turn no's into yes, you can't stop going. You got to keep chopping wood. And actually, we did an excellent job. Matter of fact, I met with the governor on that contract. And he was saying he was so happy that we were able to get the contract and service it. But look, I made sure that these drivers were on top. I used to get out there at 5 o'clock in the morning with them.
Yeah.
It's just the follow-up part and making sure that whatever you say you can do, you're going to do it.
What was the size of QCS at the time? Revenue size, how many drivers, employees? What do you think business at
QCS
that
might
time?
have been, I don't know, maybe 300,000 back then.
Because it's still very small.
Very, very small.
And I want to get to the second part of the story, which is where you became a serial entrepreneur and you started other ventures. But the growth, so I think it was 94 when you got into the parking industry.
Right.
And I want to talk about the challenges when you decided to not leave QCS, but you diverted your attention to other ventures and other opportunities. But before we get into that part, what do you recall about what was the size of QCS at that point? So when you decided to leave 94-ish and venture into the parking world, did you feel, I guess more so than the numbers, did you feel like the business was at a point where it was on autopilot, where you had things under control, you felt that you could go and venture off other things? Or was it more motivation saying, maybe QCS is not where it needs to be at, and I need to do some other things to get to this next level?
Two things, but let me put a pin in it because I want to go back to the Courier industry. I met some tremendous business owners in the Courier industry, okay? And I can honestly say that I was a young guy like you. And these older seasoned guys really took me under their wings and invited me to their companies, and one or two of them even came to our company and just helped us to just grow, looked at what we were doing and made suggestions, and that gives you a level of confidence also. When the MCA at the time was formed, I was fortunate enough to be a founding member. So again, I met leaders in the industry. And all that brings a level of confidence, a level of being able to pick up the phone and call people and get advice and guidance and so forth. So my experience in the Courier industry, my experience in the association has been nothing but positive. I remember coming back to the conferences and my staff said, Jesus Christ, he's going to have a million new ideas he's going to want to implement. I just learned so many new things. And so I did want to make sure I made that point, that there were some tremendous leaders and a lot of forward-thinking individuals when we formed this industry. Guys who were committed to seeing this industry grow. Yeah. And obviously where you all are today, it's a whole new world. But the formation, the foundation, you had some legends that were doing that.
Yeah, you were able to walk on the shoulders of some giants that started this industry, started the association, and really formalized it and brought it to national attention. You've also gone on to, you were the first African-American board member of the MCA, Messenger Courier Association of Americans at the time. It's now rebranded to CLDA. Right. And you've also been inducted into the CLDA Hall of Fame. What was that experience like? Just going from being on a founding member to ultimately being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2018.
The founding, starting an organization from the ground up was certainly exciting and tremendous for me. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I was learning so much from so many very experienced individuals who had very big businesses and diverse businesses. And I guess one of the things I've always taken pride in is my ability to connect with people. And I built some good relationships over the years, and that was helpful. When I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, it's quite an honor when your colleagues look back and think you're worthy of such an honor, because it's a great honor to be inducted into that Hall of Fame. It's like a pro football player going into his Hall of Fame. You look back and say, my work was recognized, and folks thought I did a good job at it, okay? But I want to say this, okay? I want to take a bit of personal privilege, as I do all the time.
It's your show.
Right.
I'm just hosting it.
Yeah, good. So my proudest moment was when you became a board member. And because you were the third African-American board member. And George Pillow, who's a dear friend of ours, he was the second. But you had the distinction of being the youngest, not just African-American, the youngest individual ever elected to that board. And your ability to grow and ultimately lead the organization. So that was, I was proud to be a founding member. I was proud to be in the Hall of Fame, but that was my proudest moment.
Oh, thank you. And it's, to the quote I was trying to say earlier, I messed up, but to whom much is given, much is expected in return. Right. And the same way you were able to walk on those shoulders, I was afforded the opportunity to walk on your shoulders. And certainly there were doors that were open to me because of the lineage and the things that you and mom was very involved in the business and the association supporting for many years. And so that was really a great honor for me to be able to do that, but also just as a way to pay it forward, but also to learn, to educate myself. It was really something that I was surprised by. I wasn't expecting to even be asked to run for the board at that time. But it's been certainly been such a privilege to have served on that board, and the relationships. I second what you said. So many people have helped me along my way and helped us and all kind of things. And it's got a lot to be thankful for, but certainly for the hard work you put in before that. It was my honor as well.
Good. Let me just make a point. You said you were surprised or whatever to be asked. People, you always got to do your best and be your best. People are always noticing you, always observing, always picking up on how you respond in certain situations. You didn't get in there by accident. You didn't just get in there because your name was Burns. You earned it. Yeah.
That's one thing. One thing I've learned from you, too, is there's no sense in having a seat at the table if you're going to be quiet.
That's right.
If you have the juice, you might as well use it. Right. And so I've always taken that, even from the very first board meeting I was in. I want to make sure that people knew I was in the room. And we'll get into this in a second. I've never been too afraid to say what's on my mind.
You never have.
Sometimes that hurts me. But it typically helps because it allows, as you say, allows people to see you in action. And it's not just talking, it's the walking, right? It's you're going to say something, you got to back it up and do it. And I've tried to follow in those footsteps and make sure that whenever those opportunities were presented to me, that I took full advantage, because it's important that you do that, because you want to set the tone. You want to make sure that people that come behind you have those opportunities, but also understand what it takes to be successful. All right, let's get back to the story a little bit here. Is your privilege over? You finished with your taking over?
Probably not, but I'll let you go.
So I want to get to you at mid 90s. You went on another journey and you started a parking management business, Global Parking Systems, which is now operating in 20 markets. We service a lot of airport facilities around the country. It's been tremendous growth and just took you and your career to another level. But what I'm interested to learn and get your perspective on is when you're running two businesses at the same time, like how do you juggle that? How do you prioritize things? And did you see any fall off in QCS at that time? Because one thing you and I've talked about over the years, and we'll get to when I joined the business, is you always have to have someone at the top leading and pushing the ship forward.
I want to talk about how I got into the parking business. And it goes back to networking and relationships. We did Courier work for a huge developer here in New Orleans. And this developer had a relationship with Central Parking, which was at the time the country's largest parking operator. And the city and state of Louisiana, city of New Orleans, passed legislation that said that we would have casino gaming here, okay? And the plan was to have the largest land-based casino here in New Orleans. That old Rivergate site is gone now. So the developer, who had a relationship with Central Parking, made them aware of it, and they were going to bid on it. Mm-hmm. Part of the legislation said that they had to use local and minority-owned businesses. I knew this guy because we sit on some boards. This goes back to people recognizing, noticing what you do and how you do it. And so they were looking for a minority business person that they could teach and mentor the parking business. So he recommended me to Monroe Carroll, who you know very well, who was the owner and chairman and CEO of Central Parking. They trained me at night on a parking lot downtown. I would go, it was way before technology. You hustle these cars coming in and you park them and you get the little cash that they will do a little report afterwards. So anyway, the city of New Orleans was going through a change in the mayor's office. A new mayor was coming in. And the new mayor, back before I get to that, we put the parking company together for the casino deal. Mm-hmm. We did not win it. Somebody else won it, all right? Okay. So we got a parking company, a partnership, but nothing to operate. The parking contract for the city of New Orleans had been on a month-to-month for 10 years. The new mayor came in, Mayor Mark Morial, and said any contract that was month-to-month, they were going to bid them out. They bid it out, and we won a contract, all right? Our first parking contract was here in New Orleans at the airport here. But shortly afterwards, and this goes back to politics and relationships, a good friend of mine who had close ties in Houston, Texas, indicated that they were going to have an election for a new mayor, and he had a similar platform. He was going to, anything that was month to month or the city was run, they were going to bid it out. Anyway, we bid at the Houston contract and won it. So we started growing a parking business. But when that happened, probably more with the Houston contract, because I've been back and forth between, to your point about QCS, there's a void there. Yeah. I'm here today, I'm there tomorrow, so forth. And you can do that for a while. You could try to manage those operations, but you're going to miss some stuff in there. And so the Courier company was on cruise control. We were doing all right, wasn't growing, wasn't aggressive as we needed to be. At the same time, the parking company, we picked up another contract in Los Angeles and one in San Francisco. So that business was really hopping. Yeah. I'm and Sheila, my wife and your mother, Sheila is a former transit authority executive. She came in and started helping to run a company after she retired from the transit authority. But Sheila was more interested in raising her children than the craziness of what I was doing. But let me just...
Thank you, Mom. I appreciate that.
Let me set the record straight. Sheila's the brains behind the operation. She's one of the smartest people in the world.
Yes, she is.
And she kept me grounded on all my crazy ideas. Sheila stepped in, and I probably should have said this earlier. Sheila is truly the brains behind everything that we're doing. I'm her face, but Sheila is a brilliant person. Yeah. And I'm fortunate that she is my wife and my partner.
And my mother.
And your mother.
She's a genius, no doubt.
And she's very logical and very practical about how we do things. When you're an entrepreneur, you just jump it. Just let me see, I'm gonna jump off the diving board. I'm gonna figure out how to swim on my way down, not knowing you could swim when you jump off the board. So anyway, so just a lot of, so as we started transitioning, Sheila's focus, she wanted to just be there to raise her kids and do whatever she had to do to help the business grow. But I knew I had to do something, I mean, to keep both businesses going or get rid of the courier service. So I never really wanted to get rid of that business. That's my baby. That's what it's like, getting rid of your child or giving your child away or something. When you start something, and there was so many joyful moments and so much pain, a lot of pain in growing and starting a lot of pain. And I tried a number of things.
What were some, because I think it's important that we, a part of these conversations, we talk about entrepreneurship and you talk about success. People always see the finished product, right? But they don't often see, it's like that duck below the water, how fast and erratic they may be pedaling. What were some of those painful moments as you think back on your entrepreneurial journey, specifically with QCS? What were some of those down moments where it looked like it was over, looked like it was very bleak, and you had to find some kind of way or someone to pick you up and to persevere?
Bleak moments are when you're just going through that period where you can't get new business. You constantly going after business, don't get it. Or I remember moments when we would get what we thought was a good account, they wouldn't pay you. And you got to have that cash flow come in to pay your drivers, okay? I remember the bleak moments where we had some vehicles stolen one time. So now you don't have but with a business, cash flow is so important. And I could truly remember it. I would tell you this all the time. I know we didn't always agree on how tight I was trying to keep that pocketbook. But we struggled for a long time to cover it. I didn't get paid for years. And always put the best face on. Make sure the employees got paid. You have customers, you have what you think are good accounts that just don't pay you. You got to go out and get them. And I've done that. I've gone knock on doors. It gives you a mentality of, this is a survival mentality. So you have to do what you need to survive. At the same time, I had the good fortune of Liberty Bank. Liberty Bank has been, just royal for us. They took a lot of chances on us, and thank God it worked out. But just being able to rebound, and so some people just don't pay. And sometimes it's sizable amount of money, because you go through this thing of, man, it's a good account, and we billing good. They say they're going to pay us next week, and next week never come. The cash flow thing was tremendous. And then also when you lose a key driver, and that's somebody who's been in your operation for a long time, and you got to figure out a way to replace that person. Or also when you get a customer that can grow, but then make some demands on you where you know that you can't possibly honor those demands, but you say, yes, I can.
Stuck.
And look, and this is a plus and a minus, having too much business sometimes. We used to, and y'all were little boys. It's interesting. In this industry, it seemed like Fridays is the day when everybody is overloaded with business, okay?
Yeah.
And we had a contract with, I'll call the name of the company, Paychecks. Oh, we had hundreds of deliveries. We'd live in payrolls. And I remember that I would get in the car and I would have y'all with me. And we would drive to the business, and y'all would go in and drop the payroll off. Or sometime I would go in and say, today is the day that management is doing this follow-up on things, checking on things.
Management in the
field there. We didn't have enough drivers. And let me tell you that, we laughing about it now, but that was earth-shattering, because you didn't want to lose that big account. Who was paying you?
Yeah.
You got to persevere. You got to keep moving, and ultimately you're gonna get to where you need to be.
Yeah. I want to segue to second generation and where I came. Obviously, mom worked in the business. Vinny, oldest son, my older brother, worked in business for a little while. But in end of 2008, I formally joined the business. Obviously, growing up in it, having those experiences riding around in the Ford Ranger pickup truck and doing those deliveries with you, and really, from my perspective, I knew business. I didn't have the full appreciation of what it takes to run any business, but yet alone this business, which is, people think that it's very simple, right? How it can be pick up and deliver a package.
Right.
But there's so many details, so many things happening in a single delivery that most people will never have the full appreciation for it. And I certainly didn't at that time. But I want to start the conversation off with, do you remember when I first decided to come home and we were negotiating my salary? And at the time I was living in Philadelphia. I wanted to stay in sports. But that opportunity didn't work out. And this is post Hurricane Katrina. The business was, I say, still flatlining, still trying to get back on its footing from Katrina. And you said, I could really use your help in the transportation business and Quick Courier. And I didn't at the time really, I knew at some point I wanted to come back, but that was 2 years from undergrad. I didn't think that was the time for me.
Right.
And you sent me to go visit Miss Claudia Post in Philadelphia. And I walked into her warehouse, an 80,000 square foot warehouse building, and she had everything in this warehouse. And they had trucks backing up, deliver, and my eyes opened up so wide. And I remember, man, if we can just figure out how to do 5%, 10% of this back in New Orleans, we'll be back on track. But when I came home, I wanted to negotiate my salary because I wasn't just going to come back. And two things I said: one, I didn't want to maintain status quo. And two, I wanted to make sure that I was valued and respected and appreciated. And certainly all those things came to be true. But what was the early kind of your recollection of having me, your son, back in the business full time? And what did that initially mean for you? And what was your thoughts going into that?
If I didn't tell you the story, I'm going to tell you now. When we decided you were going to come back, okay? And you came back with great endorsement because Monroe Carroll, who was our parking partner with Central Parking, and who you went to work for in Philadelphia, he called me. I called him and said, I think you might have called him until you wanted to come home. So he called me and said, I think that's a good move. Jace could really be helpful to the business, so forth and so on. But what I did, I spoke to a few people I knew whose sons had come back to join them. Can you tell me how that works? So one guy told me, he said, that's a great idea. As long as he wants to come back, don't force him. He said, but so when you get past that, if he wants to come back, he's going to make you very uncomfortable. I said, what you mean uncomfortable? Explain uncomfortable. He said, well, you're uncomfortable. You comfortable with where you are now. That thing's on cruise control and you got another business and other things you're doing. He said, but it's going to be fresh eyes coming in. It's going to be the young, aggressive approach to why can't we do this and the challenges, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember those days where we had a number of challenges.
Scrimmages, as we call them. Scrimmages.
And
but my mom played the referee on a few occasions.
She did. But I will say that, I can say this now because it's history. I think I was constantly trying to test you to see whether you really believed in everything you were saying, whether you were going to do everything you say you were going to do. And you certainly passed that test. And one of the biggest things, I think, was when we bought our building. I tell people today, ain't but one person in this world could have convinced me to buy a building, and it wasn't Sheila. But you believed in that building and the growth. Because my concern was, we're going to buy this big old building. What are we going to put in this building?
Yeah.
But we filled the building up and the business started growing. And when you got involved with the industry, just as I did, you started learning. One of our, as you call them, scrimmages was that when you wanted to change the name of the company.
Let's talk about that.
Right. Well, let's talk.
So this is the story about we rebranded the company from Quick Courier Services to QCS Logistics. And the reason that was, if you remember, we bid on, I'll say it, Oshner Hospital System, largest hospital system in Louisiana. And I remember when I first came in, one of the first things I did after learning the business and being a driver and kind of working every aspect of the business, trying to really get my hands around it, I started from a sales standpoint looking at, okay, where are the opportunities at for us to grow? And quickly identified Oshner as one of the big fish out there. And I think the early conversation, I don't know if it was you, maybe somebody else in the office, like, we can't get Oshner. Like, we've tried that. We have no shot at that. And I was like, fuck that. We're going to get Oshner. And we started doing the groundwork, laying the homework down, and we ultimately got ourselves a position to bid on it. We bid on it. I thought we had a phenomenal bid in the presentation to them. I remember being in the bathroom with the guy after the bid, and the guy was at the urinal next to me saying, there's no way y'all could lose this bid. Y'all have done a phenomenal job. And lo and behold, we lose the bid. And one of the things they said in that was, you guys can't possibly be a courier company and do everything you're saying you're going to do, right? We have so much that you got to do. A courier company can't quite handle this. And they ultimately gave the bid to a big company. I won't say the name of them. And it didn't work out for them. But that was the impetus for me saying, we got to do something different here because we can't be pigeonholed into being a courier. And I didn't like the colors that kind of got old and we needed a little fresh look. So I made this big, long presentation. We had a meeting and I don't think you knew much about it. And I put up on the PowerPoint and I go to my presentation. I think I'm doing a great job of selling this concept, but we're going to rebrand a new color scheme and we're going to do all these things. And you get up, you said, who the fuck thought about this idea? He said, I am Quick Courier Services and we ain't changing shit. I'll let you take from there.
But I think at that moment, though, maybe I didn't admit it that then. Pride and want to be in charge and don't want to be wrong. But I think I realized that the business model was changing. We had to do something different. I also realized that you could take the business to the next level. But in order to do that, we had to make some changes in our approach to things. And you were active in the industry. Well, I wasn't as active as I used to. I was spending more time with our parking business. And you were learning things from your colleagues around the country. And I remember one of the first assignments we gave you came back to review our technology. And you came back and said, y'all got horrible tech. Jamie, throw all this stuff away.
Yeah, you couldn't even use a mouse. I remember the first that was clicking on my mouse and nothing actionable was happening. I was like, what is this? I got to use a function key.
Right. So anyway, I think that I realized that it was time to look at this different. And you certainly, like I said, I tested you to see whether you were really committed to it, and you were. You certainly was the reason why that business grew.
I think I was one reason. I think for me, at that time, I think what I realized early on was, look, we have great people, and I want to make sure we give credit to a lot of our people. It wasn't just me. Right. We didn't reference his name, but Warren Gilliam, who was our partner, and former UPS, was phenomenal. He's still involved in the parking business today. But we just needed someone to come in and be that spark, to just challenge things. Why not us? Why can't we do this?
I need a quarterback.
He needs a quarterback. And once we started getting into a rhythm, we started finding a lot of success, right? The combination of your ability to network, my ability to price things and know where we should focus at and how to set the strategy, Warren's ability to operate the business and manage the team, manage the drivers, and Mom's administrative capabilities. And we had so many other people involved. We got into a real good rhythm and we were blowing and going. We had a lot of success.
Well, and I think I realized that the team you had in place, yourself, Warren, Sheila, David, Glenn, all the folks in the office that had been long timers with us, they were buying into the new approach of doing things, how we had to do things. And the guys that really challenged us. They stretched it. Y'all want it? Y'all, we want to see just how much y'all want. Yeah. And I think we had a good team, and it was almost like it was better for me to just step back and just watch y'all do y'all thing up there and step in where
Now, let's be honest. You want hands off. I can remember, and this is a question I have. I'm going to tell a quick story, but we were trying so many different things at the time, right? We got into warehouse and we started expanding the service footprint, going into North Louisiana to Mississippi. We got into cross docking, different service types, and then we got into home delivery, and we started doing white glove home delivery, and we started this account, and maybe 6 months into the account, we probably had lost 25, 30 grand because we just didn't know what the hell we're doing. And you did come to me at that point and said, you got one more month to figure this out. But my question is, because I talked to other second gen owners, and one thing I give you a lot of credit for is that you have a big ego. I've been successful.
I didn't know I had a big ego.
Yeah, you will. Remind you do. But you gave me the flexibility and freedom to make mistakes. And I think that was so important in my own development that I had the leeway to make mistakes with guardrails around it. But what gave you the ability to do that? Because a lot of people would have jumped in much sooner or say, or want to take the credit for everything, whereas you never took that approach with me. Behind closed doors, we may have our scrimmages and arguments, but in front of the house, you never knew that we were having it.
You had become our leader. And I didn't have, yes, I have a big ego, but it wasn't important for me to always be out front. I realized that you were the person that was leading the band. You should have been a drum major. The one thing that I always kept my eye on, and this goes back to learning from the experiences, whether it was Payroll Plus or Quick Courier in the early days, when we were losing money, didn't have money, right? Come up with money out of my pocket, borrow money from relatives or friends to make a payroll or whatever. I committed myself. I ain't never gonna be. And I know that you, as well as everybody else, they question, well, you don't want to spend money on this, you want to spend money on that. And as I said earlier, we had accounts that we lost money on early on, and we probably stayed too long. When I was able to get out of the day-to-day stuff and just look at those numbers, yeah, you're right. The white glove business wasn't a business that we were going to ever be able to turn around in its present state.
Yeah.
In order for us to turn around, we had to dump a lot more money into it. And I don't think you even felt that there was great upside to that. And I think over time, everybody understood their space. You were leading the company, she was administration, one was operation, and I was finance, and it worked out.
Which never came to any one of my meetings on time. And we sit in the meetings, and this guy was sitting in the meetings. He always wants to be efficient. Come to the meeting, phone rings. He takes off 5 minutes later, wants to come back, and he wants to find out everything that happened in the last 5-10 minutes. Very unproductive meetings, but we did eventually get that in shape, and I appreciate you.
Well,
I appreciate you at some point just saying, I'm not going to come to the meetings.
right.
We'll update you on one meetings. But I want to get into a couple of things that we get towards wrapping up. One of the things that I said I didn't appreciate what it takes to run a successful business are the hours, the dedication, the late nights, the early mornings. It's do what they don't, right? It's all the in between times when you're trying to make things happen, but also balancing work-life balance and things of that nature. And a lot of my work ethic that I believe that's one of my positives comes from you and seeing you Saturday mornings, going to the office 5, 6 a.m., working for a few hours before you came back and got us and going, bring us out baseball or football games that morning, or late night, coming to a practice and then dropping us off home and then going back to the office. Those, you probably didn't know at the time, but those things have always stuck with me and always been just valuable in how I try to approach me being a father now, or me being a professional, and making sure you understand that you're willing to sacrifice. If you want something great, it comes a great sacrifice. And so thank you for that, because those are lessons that I want to pass along to your grandchildren. But I want to get into the part of the story where we ultimately got to a place of selling QCS. And this was, I believe, we ultimately sold the business in 2020. But we started talking about this probably a year and a half plus prior to that, to the sale. That was a very difficult experience for both of us. I think for everybody involved. QCS, if you've talked about it, was your baby. It's been your calling card. It's been what your initial kind of claim to fame has been. I came in, was afforded opportunity to grow it, and we grew it, and I got to a point where I was getting maybe a little burnt out with it. And I approached you and Mom about looking at selling it, and the initial reaction was not very positive. That was not something that you wanted to do. Walk me through that experience and ultimately to where we sold it and how you feel about it now. Because I get this question a lot from people in the industry today is, are you happy with the outcome of it? Would you do something differently again? But from your perspective as a first gen and as the founder, as much as I felt an affinity to QCS and played my role in helping to get there, it was not my baby from the beginning. So what is that like? What was that experience like? And ultimately having to let go of your baby and exit?
I think anybody who starts a business, whether it's QCS and other business, you started and grew and you had the joy, the pain, the frustration, the enthusiasm, whatever goes along the way, that becomes a part of you. It's who you are. That is, yeah, people sometimes say you got to separate yourself from the business. You can't when you're not. I never. And I think there's two ways you go there. One is that, again, I had all the faith and confidence in the world in you. You would come back from your board meeting. Mergers, positions taken. We were getting letters from companies. I would just ball them up and practice my jump shot.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't blind to that. I knew you were seeing something and you weren't just making a hasty decision. The other side, so you knew a change is coming. The other side is that you can't help but to just go down memory lane and reflect on all the things you did to just grow the business. And you really focused a lot on its infinite. First start, all of the conversations, the folks that helped, the folks who came through those doors, how many lives you've changed. And I think I was having a battle within myself on those two different points. But ultimately, true to who you are, you committed to what you believe in. And you never Like I didn't walk out of the lottery man's office and said, okay, you didn't walk away either and say, you don't want to do it. We ain't going to do it. I'll just keep. So you really believed in that. We should look at it, okay? And you did the work. You got some of your colleagues in the industry to look at different proposals that we have. Give you an idea. We traveled to come to other companies that might have an interest in it. And I think ultimately all that kind of softened me a little bit. And I think it's interesting. When we eventually sold a drop-off, interesting the way, I remember we went to lunch with Sean at the Winter Court. He and his family went down on vacation.
Yep.
And then he invited us up to his office a week or so later now. And I was still 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But it was something about this could be a good deal for all. And then as we started negotiating, when we made a decision we're going to move forward, I think as we look, and you really took the lead on it. You really dealt with the attorneys, did a lot of negotiation. We had our finance people involved, Peter and Waldo and those folks. I think you really clearly understood the transaction. Obviously, I had some parameters that I didn't feel that we should waver on. And I think at the end of the day, it turned out to be a good deal. I told you that, doesn't it? I think in hindsight, that was the right decision. Because there's two ways to look at it. And this is what it came down for me also. We had to do one of three things, okay, at that crossroads. One was do nothing. And probably we just got eaten. Two was we could merge with another company and probably survive that way. Or three was merge either sell to somebody. Or three was if we're going to grow, we got to dump a lot of money in. We just really got to ramp up. And I knew you at our point, our leader, and you got to start with the leader. The quarterback come to work and say, I don't feel like playing today. That ain't a good sign. And so I knew you were ready to do some other entrepreneurial things. And also we had the parking business that we all were involved in that was doing well. I think that made the transaction smooth. And then I think you went to Drop-Off with a significant role. Drop-Off's a good company. I think we spent a lot of time with the ownership of Drop-Off. And I feel real comfortable about your future and Walmart and the rest of the staff. And one of the things that I want to make sure is that obviously you would take care of the right way. Walmart was. Sheila and I walked away with consulting contracts, but our whole staff, that was the requirement that they couldn't replace our whole. Yeah. And that made it easy, okay? And it was the kind of company that we can believe in. Because remember, this New Orleans is a market where there's a lot of personal relationships. Yeah, I could pick up the phone and call a hospital CEO or the bank president, or you and I could meet with some executive at night for dinner, and you got to be here to do that. I mean, we're in the same social circle, the same events and so. And for us to sell to a company, we had to be comfortable with that. Because remember, we had to make sure that company was doing what they said they're going to do, because we still want to make sure these companies, these accounts were still there, because that's how we got paid. And I think it was a good match, really does. But a lot of that has to do with you, Jason. I think that you know me well, and you probably know what buttons to push and what not to push. And you probably knew what was the best fit for all. Okay. And at the end of the day, I realized that it was ultimately going to be, I had the biggest voice in the room. I think we were smart enough to realize once I get that voice, everything else is. And I just think the confidence that I had in your ability to make the right decision, even from the standpoint of picking the right attorneys and making sure that we clearly understand this transaction. Because these transactions can get a little complicated. So.
It can, yeah. And it was a difficult process, but one where I think we all learned a lot about personal and professional. It truly was a tug of war going through that experience, but I do believe that it was also the best one. And I just appreciate the opportunity I had to do it, but also the faith and the confidence that to make and influence kind of that decision. Right. I want to wrap up on a couple things. One, I want to say this because it's important that you hear it and that the audience has perspective of this. And I put up some stats. Every time we had these holiday parties, we would go through and I would give some stats about QCS and the year in review. And I remember one of the last ones, so QCS was around 36 years. And we did some numbers of the number of drivers or just employees and staff that had came through the company, over 3,500 individuals. And we looked at the economic impact of QCS in this community. There's over $20 million in terms of the impact, in terms of compensation or charitable giving over a course of a 36-year history. And there's not too many people that can say that. And from an idea that you had, the ingenuity to transition from a payroll company to birth a courier business that had that kind of impact, whether we own QCS today or not, the history and the legacy of that business will carry on forever and in many people's lives, something to be very proud of. I'm so proud to be a part of that story. And thank you for taking a chance on yourself. And that leads into my last question here, which we didn't talk about it early on in the podcast, but when you were transitioning from Liberty Bank to start Payroll Plus and you read that manifesto, you went to your parents, you went to grandpapa and talked about this. And they were not overly supportive initially, from my understanding. They thought you were crazy for taking a leap of faith at that time. You have a wife, one kids, or one on the way. But something in you continue forward, and after you took that bet, and you've had an incredible career, one that many people probably dream about. As we wrap up, and I ask this question to all guests, think about your last or first moment. Put yourself back in that room, talking to grandpapa, and not getting the encouragement, not getting the support from your parents initially. I know they were tremendously supportive over the years, and having to take that bet on yourself. Papa's not here anymore. Grammy is obviously still with us, but what do you think Papa and Gram would say, looking back at that moment and your career and the impact you've made, not just professionally, but personally on so many people's lives in this community?
I think they would say they made a, as much as I hate to say my parents made a mistake. I think one of the things that they would say they realized, I think they knew I was a hard worker. That
Yeah, he's here.
I think they would know I was a hard worker. And I think that when they thought about after I left the room, as time passed, I think they knew that I would always do the right thing by them. Work hard, treat people right, give back to the community, all the things that we ought to do.
Yeah. I think they are, and have been tremendously proud. And I think every child just wants their parents to believe in them. And you had that, and your siblings had that. But maybe in that moment, the thing that's probably stands out, that you have to believe in yourself more.
Right.
And that is one of the pivotal things about any great entrepreneur, that the belief in yourself has been greater than any doubt or disbelief that anybody may have about you. And so another testament to you and your conviction and that vision that you had.
I think they knew, regrouping, I think they knew that I was not going to.
Yeah.
I was not going to. Look, I think they knew I had a lot of support around me.
Yeah.
And I think that they knew that. I knew clearly that I thought about this. It wasn't something that was a hasty decision. So I think they're proud. Paul is gone now, but when I walk in the month, I talk to her.
Very proud. If he's here right now, I know he'd be. He said, "Stop that crying."
No, but I think I still feel in my heart that I do talk to my dad no more. And I think he still gives me good advice.
That it's certainly an honor to have you on the podcast. But more importantly, just for your constant belief in me, always supporting me. Not very many people are fortunate to have lived the life I've lived, and that's a direct tribute to you and Mom and your parents and the lineage that I come from. But our relationship's always been a special one, and we know how to push and pull sometimes and have our scrimmages. But at the end of the day, I know who's in my corner, and that's a gift.
I want the public to know this, or your listening audience, that you've always been a hard worker, And you've always had to pay the price of what you wanted. And you've always been focused on what you want to accomplish. And you had a roadmap how you could get there. And I'm clearly proud of that. And I'm proud that your evolution as a business person is exciting. This is a new industry for you. This is something that's very rewarding because people want to hear these kind of stories. As I tell you and I tell Vinny, I'm proud to be your daddy. At one time, I used to run around this town and people say, Vinny and Jason are your children. Now they'll say, Vinny and Jason's dad. So anyway, long story short, I'm just proud of what you're doing. I think you have something that's what folks want to hear. And just one last thing in closing, I'm glad that you're taking the time to not just talk to the young entrepreneurs, but talk to some of the legends in this industry since you focus on this, because these are the guys that's the foundation of where we are. And a lot of times we don't know our history.
Yeah.
And that's so critical to know the history of how we got there. And this is it's going to sound like a knock on young people. I don't mean for it to sound like a knock on young people. But with this age of instant gratification and everybody wants stuff to happen overnight, you got to understand how you get there. Yeah. You really got to understand. And as I close, I'm proud that you understand that. Yeah. You got to keep chopping wood. You can't stop.
And I thank you for that. And I'm just truly blessed and thankful to have this experience. And we got to do this again. This was more focused on your experience as QCS, right. But there's so many more things we can talk about. Right. And I'm sure we'll do it again. But thank you for helping us close out season 1 of Last of First. We're looking forward to many more.
I love you, Jay.
Love you
Best
too.
of love to you.
Thank you.
All right.
Love you, Dad.